Hello everyone, I am Poohead189, longtime Forgotten Realms fan and lore enthusiast, and today I'm going to be giving a review on D&D 5e's new book, Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden. Now, give me your ear for just 12 seconds before we begin. I just made a new Patreon page, because this channel does require money and time. But anyone who knows me knows I hate taking people's money, so there's only two tiers. The first tier is $2, and the next is $3. It's a little bit that goes a long way, honestly, and by the time this video is released, there will be various adventure seed suggestions in my Patreon to help you flesh out Rime of the Frostmaiden a bit more. So if you can help the channel, that will be great, but if not, don't feel pressured. Okay, now that that's over with, let's get to the review. So, as always, whenever I see a new D&D sourcebook out, I do what I always do. I drive to the bookstore and I read it in the bookstore for an hour or two because I'm fucking poor. Don't be alarmed, I'm not reviewing it from memory. My friend gifted me the sourcebook on D&D Beyond for $30, which is $20 cheaper than the hard copy in bookstores. However, D&D Beyond sourcebooks are not PDFs, and they cannot be shared, so I do not recommend it. You can get Rime of the Frostmaiden on Amazon for around $30 now anyway, so I suggest ordering it off there instead, or finding a third-party retailer since Amazon is a bit too greedy of a company for my liking. Anyway, Icewind Dale has a special place in my heart, as it is where much of Drizzt Do'Urden's adventures occurred, and I've been reading those novels since I was 12. Seeing as I'll be 30 next year, it shows how big of a fan I am and how goddamn long I've been one. So when I opened this book, I was going to be very critical because I'm not the biggest fan of 5e, and if they ruined Icewind Dale, I was going to flip. But this is actually a really good book. The front cover is made by Tyler Jacobson, who also did a lot of other 5e art for the sourcebooks and the Sundering series. Now, this book has a prologue section, 7 chapters, and appendices in the epilogue section. It's a meaty book at 320 pages, chock full of information. The first 2 chapters are nothing but lore, information, and adventure seeds, which is good. In fact, it is excellent. Lore and story is by far the most important part of any book for D&D, no matter how great the central adventure is. So, the beginning of the book has some neat info on the lore and environmental challenges you need to face, like how long it takes to move across snow, what happens in an avalanche, etc. Thanks to Auril, the titular Frostmaiden, who is a lesser goddess of winter, there is no sunlight in all of Icewind Dale during this adventure. There's only 4 hours of light per day, and these hours are there when Auril flies over the tundra and leaves behind an aurora borealis. So you're definitely going to need some light sources or dark vision in order to see. It is somewhat strange because the art is great, like really good, but it hardly shows any images that show off the near perpetual darkness Icewind Dale is experiencing, so it makes everything look like it's sunlight, even though it's supposed to be really dark almost all the time. They try to play this book off as a horror adventure because it's supposedly dark, there's a constant winter so cold it's cold even for Icewind Dale, and the snow is so high that there's no escape south. But a lot of that is just backdrop, so while it might add some helplessness and add to whatever other sinister elements are in the book, it's not really a scary adventure. So this adventure is pretty much as follows. 2 chapters giving off sweet information and lore. The next 3 chapters detail 3 fairly standalone adventures, which I think is great. Like making each adventure standalone in this giant book is great. They are tangentially related, however, particularly the first 2 adventures. And then the last 2 adventures are somewhat related as well, and you finish in this really neat glacial discovery. I'll talk a bit more about these chapters soon, but I also plan on trying to leave out spoilers, so don't fret. Now what I do really love here is near the end of the prologue chapter where they give off 2 lists. One is a list of character backgrounds and reasons why your character might be there, and the other is a chart of secrets that player characters could have. The reason they add secrets, as every good Forgotten Realms fan knows, is because Icewind Dale's settlements are named 10 towns, because there's 10 of them, and the people only really travel there to escape or hide from something in the south. Because Icewind Dale is so inhospitable, it's literally the ass end of the world. So people go there to disappear. I also love that 2 of these secrets alluded to the Drizzt novels quite nicely. I really love that. However, this book is kind of strange in that, though it gives good reasons for people to be in Icewind Dale, it's sort of loose and unenticing when it comes to reasoning on why the player characters will do missions. It seems like the book sort of assumes you're a good aligned party, because most places don't have rewards or won't pay you for your services. The only motivation you have in most adventures is that it'll get you experience and maybe a mug of ale, which isn't a good in-universe reason to go and risk your life. Particularly the experience part. This is why I'm adding some adventure seeds in my Patreon to help you guys out with that. I will say that not all are like that, not all the quests, and some that are do it in a clever way. Like in one of the towns called Caer Dinevel, your party tries to get rooms at an inn and the innkeeper tells them it's all booked, so why don't you go try the speaker's house, and the speaker is like the leader of the town. And there you find more than you expected in his house. And I thought that was a neat way to do things, so they are creative in it. But yeah, let's dive into Chapter 1. This chapter details all about 10 towns, which as stated are the 10 settlements of Icewind Dale, which are pretty much the only real civilization there are other than some dwarves in a small clan settlement and some barbarian huts. Now, these settlements range from 100 to about 1,000 people, so it's all pretty small. The chapter gives off great info, and gives each settlement 3 main places of interest, as well as a very fun ranking system on each town's hospitality, judged by friendliness, services, and comfort. There's also 2 main starter quests and a bunch of smaller ones to take, my favorite smaller one being Bremen's Loch Ness Monster type adventure. I will say if you take the Cold-Hearted Killer quest, one of the main starter ones, and there's 2 main starter ones, so this is one of them, you might not want to be a bunch of level 1s doing it, because the killer himself has 75 hit points, has difficulty rating 3, and can heal in frigid temperatures, which is everywhere in Icewind Dale. Now, you don't have to fight him. It gives you other options, but I would suggest not fighting him. The other, until you're level 2, or probably 3 is the best. The other adventure is called Nature Spirits, and it's kind of a very fey quest that 5e has embraced over the years, but there's no real fighting in it, so it might be good to start out with level 1s. There's also a bunch of little additions in Chapter 1 like rumors and such, so it's a great chapter. Chapter 2 is pretty much the exact same thing as 1, except it's on Icewind Dale as a whole rather than the main settlements. A lot of info that's really neat to check out. Something to note is there's 4 main antagonists in this book, and I will begin to talk about a few now. Now, I stated earlier that the first 2 adventures in Chapter 3 and 4 are related. That is because these chapters have to do with an invasion of Grey Dwarves, or Duergar, who are invading the surface to create the first above-ground Duergar Empire. You can either attack the dwarf fortress or fight the vast mechanical dragon monstrosity that is attacking 10 towns that they are controlling. You can do one or the other, or both, depending. I recommend having your party at level 5 by the time they raid the fortress, but level 4s could probably survive. It does recommend 4, there's so many side quests you can do, why not level up? Now with the dragon threat, one of the biggest problems there, other than fighting the thing, is knowing where it is going to attack and when. If left unchecked, it will destroy every town of 10 towns. If you raid the fortress first, you'll get some inkling as to where it will strike and when, but honestly, looking at any map and keeping up with where the Duergar fortress is in comparison to 10 towns, will show you, if you just use some rational sense. It's coming from the south, so it'll hit the southernmost town first kind of deal. However, these aren't the biggest threats in the campaign, potentially at least. I mean, they're pretty huge threats, but you do have Auriel the Frostmaiden, the goddess that the whole thing is named after, whose curse blights the region and who you can potentially deal with in Chapter 5, although you could also potentially deal with her in Chapter 7. Depends. There's also 2 more enemies, which the first one is the Arcane Brotherhood, who can be allies if you play your cards right, but they're here to find an ancient netherese city under the ice. And then the final enemy is sort of a spoiler, but you'll get to them, when you run the adventure, but it's pretty big. Now, the epilogue chapter with the appendices and the ending bits of the adventure is very neat and adds a great touch to the entirety. It gives 4 different endings depending on the player's choices. I won't go over all of them because it's best if you look for yourself, but they're really cool. So, what would I rate this adventure? Well, I'll give it a solid 7.5 to 8 out of 10 depending on my mood, really. I think it's an excellent adventure with a lot of great material that creates a good, large campaign and a few awesome one-shots. My problem mostly lies with the lack of incentives for low-level players with the side quests. not really making good on its horror genre promise, and the fact that it can be a bit silly when you feel it should choose to be serious. Like in the book, there's a druid spell that some druids have cast over the land, which makes a lot of the normal tundra animals you find able to just talk to you. That takes away a huge part of the isolation and loneliness of the campaign that's supposedly horror, and is just not needed. 5e does this a lot, trying to be quirky when there's no need, but that doesn't mean this isn't a great book. And it is easily worth $40 to $45 in my opinion. Hell, if you're impatient getting it, going out for the full $50 wouldn't be a bad deal. All in all, very solid. I'm going to enjoy reading through it a bit more on my end. Okay, thanks guys. Like, comment, or subscribe if you want to. And glad to have y'all here. Have a great one.